Hi, welcome to week 2 of the Phoebe Quiltalong. Today we're going to cut our fabrics, and I'm just going to do a video where I cut all of my fabric. And so you can kind of get an idea of how long it takes. I'll try to give you some tips as we go. If you have any questions, post them in the comments and I will try to respond to them. And I am going to save this video both to Instagram and to YouTube, so you can watch it later. I am going to use fat eighths for my quilt, and the fabric requirements for the lap size quilt for fat eighths are 20 fat eighths, but I have 27 that came in the bundle. I'm not using 2 of them, I'll show you why in a minute. And so I'm going to use 25, which is more than the pattern calls for, because I want to get more variety in my quilt, because I have it, so why not? But it does mean I'm just going to change how I'm going to cut my fat eighths a little bit. In the pattern, there's a cutting diagram that shows how you can get the most pieces out of your fat eighth, or fat quarter, or jelly roll strip. Because I am going to need fewer pieces, I am going to cut mine a little bit differently than the diagram in the pattern. And the way I figured out how many I needed to cut from each fat eighth is in the cutting instructions table. It lists the total number of pieces that you need of each size. So I just divided that number by 25, since that's how many I have. So it gave me a slightly lower number of pieces that I need. Instead of needing 6 of the bigger pieces, I need 5. And instead of needing 4 of the smaller pieces, I need 3 for most of them, and then I need to cut a 4th piece from a few of the fabrics. So we're going to get started with the cutting. I'm going to primarily be using my Stripology ruler just because that's what I normally use. I will show you cutting with a different ruler, but I would prefer not to use it, so I'm not going to cut much of those. I'll demonstrate that first. So let me flip you around. How do I flip around? There we go. Okay. So sorry. Let me set you up on here so I can have my hands free. And I did pick a background fabric, and I've already pressed it, so I'll show you which one it is when I get to that. Oh, actually, I'll cut my background fabric first, because that's what I like to do. I am using the pink. I just figured this was I probably prefer the other one, but I also prefer to play it safe with background fabric. So I couldn't tell whether I preferred it just because I like to play it safe or because I actually preferred it. So we're going to give this a try and see how it goes. I have more than I need because I ordered more than I needed. So right now I like to cut my fabric folded into quarters. So, the fabric comes folded in half with the selvages together, and then I fold it again, because if you have a shorter distance to cut, you're less likely to have something slip while you're cutting, and it's just faster. Plus, it's no big deal if you have a sharp rotary blade to cut through 4 layers of fabric. So I'm just making sure that everything is lined up well here. This piece of fabric was actually really well folded. Sometimes fabrics aren't folded well in half, like the selvages aren't lined up, but this was actually really well folded, and I would have fixed it when I pressed my fabric anyway. So I am going to cut background fabric, which is not very exciting, but that's why I like to do it first, because then it's just done. And I always cut all of my fabric at once. If you're doing a test block, obviously don't do that, but I just like to have it all ready to go, because once I start sewing, my cutting table gets covered in stuff. All right, so let me move this over. All right, sorry, that's my light that's above me. So this is the Stripology XL ruler, and I have a regular Stripology ruler too, and it was just a little bit this distance is just a little bit shorter, and it just made it really hard to cut. The XL is the way to go. I love it. I use it all the time. So one nice thing about the Stripology ruler is that it has a 0 slot here, which means you square up your fabric. And also, see, there's a white line up here. I've got it lined up all the way across with the fold so that I make sure that my fabric is nice and straight. So I'm going to start by cutting the bigger pieces. In the pattern, we need to cut 5 of the 6.5 by width of fabric strips. So I'm going to cut those first, and then I'm going to work down to the smaller pieces, just because it just tends to be more fabric efficient to cut bigger pieces first. So I'm going to cut those first, and so be really careful if you use this ruler not to put your fingers in the way. So 6.5, and you have to do a little math in your head. 13, 19.5. Oh, I just tried to escape my table. Okay, so now I've got my first 3 strips cut. I'm going to set those up here, and I'm going to cut the next 2 strips. And I am going to cut all my width of fabric strips first too, just because that's how I usually do it. Okay, I'm re-straightening everything out. I only need 2 more of the 6.5 inch pieces. And then I also am going to need 5. Oh wait, no, yeah, I cut 3. Okay, I need 2 more 6.5 inch and then 5 4.5 inch. So I'm going to do, that squares up my edge. I'm going to do 6.5, 13. Let me turn this way. And then I'm going to do, that makes it 2. You can only get one of the 4.5 inch pieces from this cut. Okay, so I'm going to set those 2 aside, and then I'm going to finish cutting my 4.5 inch pieces. Okay, so I've got 1, I need 4 more. And if you have trouble adding it up in your head, 4.5 plus 4.5, you don't want to make a mistake. It's okay to just write it down. So write down 4.5, 9, 13.5, 18. So that you don't make a mistake. So it's like measure twice, cut once, math twice, cut once. Don't guess if you're not sure. Okay. 4.5, 9. And I'm using these, the numbers are right on the bottom. It says 13.5, 18. This has a slot every 1/2 inch. And there are ways to do 1/4 inch cuts or whatever, but we don't need to worry about that today. Okay, so now I've got 5 of these, and now I need 5 2.5 inch. So I will use a regular ruler to show you how I would cut those. I'm straightening everything out again. Okay, I like, there we go. I like this Creative Grids 8.5 by 24.5 inch long ruler. I use it for most cutting. It's nice. It's pretty non-slip, and it's big. Did I say 6.5? It's 8.5 by 24.5 inch. It's the big one. Okay, so I'm going to cut a little bit more than 2.5. I'm cutting 2.5 inch strips. I'm going to cut a little bit more than 2.5 inches, and then I'm going to flip it over and square up the edge, because just in case things shifted, and they kind of did a little bit when I re-straightened things up. So now I'm going to cut a 2.5 inch strip. There we go. So now this is squared up. Oops. Okay. Now I need 4 more. So when I cut these, I'm making sure that I'm lining up these vertical lines with the 2.5 inch lines, but then I'm also using some of these horizontal lines to make sure that I'm lined up with the fold, because otherwise when you open your strip, it won't be straight. So now there's the second one. And if at any point the horizontal lines are no longer lined up, I would square up the edge again. 3. 4. Let me move those so I don't accidentally cut them. Okay, 5. See, you can see how much faster this stripology ruler is. And this, I ordered a little bit of extra fabric just because I knew we were doing the Quiltalong and I didn't want to make a mistake and then have to order more fabric. So I have some bonus fabric. All right. Now I'm going to subcut my strips. So I have these width of fabric strips. And one thing you can do is stack them. So I'm going to do 2 at a time. Actually, I have a brand new rotary blade on my cutter, so I'm going to do 3 at a time. That's kind of, you're supposed to really only do 4 layers of fabric, and this is going to be 6, but I have a brand new rotary blade on, so I'm going to be a little breaking the rules. Okay. Nice and smooth. There we go. I leave my selvage on and I just cut it off at this point. I know some people cut off their whole selvage at once, which is fine. Especially if you want to save it and use it for something. But I don't do that. All right, so I'm going to be cutting 2.5-inch strips. So I want to make sure that I have a horizontal line lined up with the edge of my fabric. And I want to make sure that this 0 mark here is giving me plenty of room to cut off the selvage. So one nice thing about these rulers is that every 2.5 inches there's a square, and every 1.5 inches there's a star. Since those are common strip width sizes, that saves you from having to do the math. So I know I just need to cut at every square since I'm cutting 2.5-inch pieces. So cut off the selvage and square up. Watch your fingers. I'm going to cut every 2.5 inches. Move this over. Okay, I just did 10, 12.5, 15, 17.5, 20. Did you hear how nice and sharp my rotary blade was? Makes a big difference. Okay, so now I know that I have 6 pieces in each of these. I need total 120. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times 6 is 48. Wait, that's not right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to cut, oh no, not 120. I was like, that doesn't add up. I was looking at the twin size. I need 80. So that was 48. I've got 2 more strips, and so I need 32 more. Oops. I like to keep the selvage, since I left the selvage on, I like to keep them facing the same direction so that I don't make sure that I cut too far, cut into the selvage and have that show up in my fabric. So I want to make sure that I can see it so that I cut it all off. It's very cute, but I don't want it in my quilt. Oh, sorry. So I'm giving this plenty of room to cut that off. So I had 48. Okay, making sure to line up the top of my fabric. So this will be 54, 60, 66, 72, 78, 84. That gives me a few extra pieces, but that's okay. So this is what I have left over afterwards. Now I could cut some of my other pieces from this, but I have plenty of fabric, so I'm going to set this aside for scraps. I never feel like I waste projects or waste fabric if I have leftovers, because I will always find a way to use it. Okay, I will show you how I subcut with a regular ruler on some of these 4.5-inch strips. Okay, I'm going to stack 2. I'm going to smooth everything out. I'm making sure nothing's shifted and everything is lined up nicely. If you don't unfold it, it usually stays pretty nicely. I've got my big old ruler here. Okay, I'm going to line up some of the horizontal lines with the edge and give myself plenty of room over here to cut off the selvage. I'm going to cut, and then I'm going to flip over and cut the selvage off. Okay. Now I'm going to cut 2.5-inch pieces. I know this isn't very exciting. We'll get to the fun fabrics in a minute. I mean, not that this isn't a fun fabric, but it's a lot of cutting the same fabric. So one of the reasons why I almost didn't use this fabric for the backing is that I remembered, or the background, is that I remembered that I had a backing fabric that's from this collection. It's actually this print, and I didn't want, that has a lot of pink. So if I had this on the front and then that on the back, I thought that might be a little bit too much. I like pink, but that's a lot. But then I remembered I actually have 2 different prints from this collection that I bought as backing fabric, and I can use that easily. That'd be a great scrap quilt backing, or I can use it for something else. So I decided it would be okay. I'll show you which one, but it's one of the plaid. It's one of the dark blue plaid prints from Strawberry and Friends. All right, now I've got my last 3 strips, and I know that, let's see, how many are we getting from each strip? 16 pieces. So I have so far 32 pieces cut, and I need to cut, how many, what's 80 minus 32? 48. So I need to, oh yeah, that's right. Be the same as the last one. So I need to cut 48 pieces, and each time I cut, I'm cutting 6 pieces, 6. So I need to cut 8 times. So I'm just going to count that because it's a little easier. Oh, okay. 1, 2, 3. Put this over for you. 4, 5. That was 12.5, right? 6, 7, 8. Okay. So that'll get me enough pieces. Okay, so now I have my 2.5-inch squares, 2.5-inch pieces left. So I usually, to cut, well, it can vary a lot, depending on how many different shapes. Cutting a scrap quilt can take a really long time. But a project like this, where you have a really limited number of shapes, and you're cutting from a pre-cut or a yardage, an hour tops. Usually more like 30 minutes to cut all the fabric. We'll see how long this takes me. Can I cut while talking, though? That's the question. I don't know. Okay, I've got 3 strips lined up here. I'm just going to keep doing what I've been doing. I've been cutting 2.5 strips for each, 2.5-inch pieces for each one, so. Let me scoot you over. Sorry, I wish this had a wider angle lens, but. Okay. All right, now for the next one, I'm going to go ahead and cut 2.5-inch pieces all the way down, even though that's going to give me a few extra pieces, and that's because I love having 2.5-inch square scraps, so I might as well just cut them now because they will get used. It's like super easy to use scrap size. I could also cut them into a different shape if I had a specific project. I try to sometimes do that. Okay. 2.5-inch squares. All right, we're done cutting the background fabric. All done. Okay, I'm going to move it out of the way. And now I'm going to get my feature fabric pieces out. Now, I have already pressed these. And you don't have to press them so that they're like completely smooth, but you just want them to be able to sit flat. So I have all of them pressed and ready to go right here. So probably what I'm going to do is, let's see, how many do I want to cut at a time? I can probably do 4. So what I'm going to do is take 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of the prints, move those well out of the way. Now these all have selvage on them. I'm going to line up, unstack them first. I'm going to line them up and at the selvage at the bottom, and then smooth them out before I do anything. Aren't these pretty? I like this collection. This Quiltalong was the perfect excuse to use it. Okay. So what I'm going to do, like I said, I'm using more prints than the minimum that it calls for in the pattern. Oh, so what I'm going to do now first is fold it in half. So your selvage may not line up perfectly with the edge, the non-selvage edge for like a fat eighth or a fat quarter. That's okay. Trust the selvage. Don't worry about the other. So let's see if we can get the whole thing. Okay. Hey everybody. All right. So what I'm going to do instead of cutting like the diagram in the pattern, since I don't need that many pieces from each one, is I'm actually going to switch to using this quilt cut ruler because it's a little bit smaller and it's just easier to handle, and I don't need the whole width. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to cut a 6.5-inch strip, and then I'm going to subcut all my pieces from that, and then it will save me a good chunk of scrap that I can use for a different project someday. So I am using more prints, which means I'm using more of the bundle, but I am then going to have more left over from each print that I can save for something else. And this would make part of a really fun scrap quilt. So I'm going to cut a 6.5 inch piece. This is the part I squared up. This is my leftover. Save that for something else. Okay. And I'm not going to cut all my, I'm going to subcut them now. So now I'm going to switch to the bigger ruler. I might as well just use this one so that I have the full amount. So I figured out that because I'm using 25 different prints, I need to cut 5 of the 6.5 inch pieces and 3 of the 4.5 inch pieces. So what I'm going to do, I want to make sure that I'm not including the selvage. So oops. I usually will put a piece that has the selvage, the whiter selvage part showing on top, so I make sure, but I didn't do that this time. So I just need to make sure that I'm not including that. Okay. So I'm going to cut my 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I'm going to set those aside. I'm now going to cut this down to 4.5 inches. And I know, are you thinking, is she going to save that? Yes, I'm going to save that scrap. That would be great for a string quilt. Am I a hoarder? I don't know. Okay, now I need 3 more of these. So that actually worked out really nicely size-wise. I do need to cut from 5 prints. I need to cut an extra 2.5 or an extra one of these. I figured that out. So I will worry about that. I will pick some prints at some point and do that. Okay. I'm going to do my next set. So you can't see it here, but I'm just lining up this selvage on the bottom and smoothing. How many did I do there? 4? I'll do that again. That was fine. One nice thing about using the larger Stripology ruler as opposed to that smaller quilt cut ruler is, even though it's a little bit more unwieldy and heavy, it helps keep your fabric in place better. So I'll probably just use it. This is the other print that I have for backing. So that's what my backing fabric will be. And I have 2 of the 1/2 yards of the floral print. I think the blue and the orange, I can't remember, that I'll use one of those for the binding, but I don't know which one yet. And I don't know where I put them, so it could be the green. I'm pretty sure it's the blue and the orange. So I'm just smoothing everything out and lining things up along the selvage. Now, flip it over. Oh, the dog's barking. Okay. The dogs are fighting with each other. Okay. I'm going to scoot this over a little bit so that I have more room for the ruler because it's giant. So if you're wondering how you store something like this, actually just store it leaning against my cutting table. It works pretty well. It's definitely feels a little flimsy, but it's actually been pretty durable. Okay, so I'm trimming off the edge here, just square up, and I'm going to cut 6.5 inches. Save this for something else. I'm going to open this up. Okay, now I'm going to cut my 5 6.5-inch pieces. One, two, three, 4, 5. Let's get this out of the way. Now I'm going to cut this down to 4.5 inches. And I think with this pattern, I can't think of a directional fabric that I would worry about directionality in this pattern, since everything gets rotated and kind of, it's meant to look kind of twisted around. I'm going to end up with almost all my pieces directionally the same, but you certainly, I wouldn't worry about it at all. Some patterns I worry about it. To be honest, most I don't. There are times when it's nice. Okay, now I've got my 4.5-inch pieces. You need fewer 4.5-inch pieces. You need 3 6.5 for each block and just 2 4.5. So that blue, by the way, was what I have then. Where'd that go? This is probably what I'm going to use for my binding. That blue floral, it's so pretty. Here's the green one. I think I'll use the blue though, since it will match the backing. 1, 2. Okay, I think I'm going to be a little bit bad here, and I'm going to cut. I'm going to do 5, and then I'm going to cut my extra 2.5 by 4.5-inch piece from all of these, and then I don't have to worry about them anymore. How many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4. One more. 5. That will also mean that I'll end up with an even number of cuts. So if I do 1, 5 and the rest by 4, well, that will be all of them. All of my fabrics. I won't have to. So I do think, like, if it's nice to flip over the fabric and then smooth it out again, because sometimes things get, you don't want the fabric, once you fold it, there to be any like folded parts in here. You know, you can feel, it's feeling kind of weird. So you don't want any crumply parts in there. Okay. All right, let's see how my rotary cutter does cutting through 10 layers of fabric. Don't tell. It's our secret. Okay. I have a feeling that this part is it's gonna protest. Okay, I need to make sure that I have enough. I need 9 inches, and this is barely gonna be enough, so it's fine. There is enough. I just need to make sure. Oh, yes, we did it. 6.5, and then I'm gonna get 2.5. Okay, so I have plenty. All right, let's set those aside. Let's cut this one first. You can see that, like, there's a little bump there where it was folded. That won't normally happen. It's because of how many layers I had stacked. Or it shouldn't normally happen, at least. It's okay. Two, 3, 4, 5. Okay. I'm going to cut this down to 4.5 inches. if one day I make a Strawberry and Friends string quilt, you'll know where that fabric came from. Okay, I'm going to do 3. 1, 2, 3. And remember, I needed to cut a 4th piece from 5 fabrics to make sure I had enough, since I am using more prints than the pattern called for. So I'm going to cut that from this leftover, from this 2.5-inch strip. I'm just opening this up so that it's not folded anymore. Okay, making sure it's nice and smooth. So I'm just going to cut one 4.5-inch piece. There's a scrap piece of fabric stuck to this. That's okay. 4.5. That's it. Okay, so now I have my extra piece done, and I don't have to worry about those anymore. This is now scrap. Okay, so let's do 4. We're almost done. I think we need 2 more stacks of fabric, I think. This is the first Quiltalong that I've done where I haven't made 2 quilts. I always regret doing 2 quilts in a Quiltalong because it just gets to be a lot, especially when it comes to then quilting and basting and quilting those quilts. So I really I really wanted to do a second one, but I wouldn't let myself because life is I need 2 more stacks. Okay. Life is very busy right now. We have so many orchestra concerts and birthdays and stuff. Okay. That scrap piece is still hanging on for dear life. It's stuck in between the slots. It's fine. I'm not going to cut anywhere near it. Okay, I'm cutting a 6.5-inch piece. 6.5. Okay, set this aside. Open this guy up. Okay, I'm going to cut my 5 6.5-inch pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, now I'm going to cut this down to 4.5 inches. I like this print on top. It's so cute. Okay, now I'm going to cut my last 3 pieces from here. This, you can imagine cutting this from a jelly roll is really fast because you already have your 2.5-inch width. So all you need to cut is cut it down to the smaller pieces. It is very quick. So I actually let's see, this is the first one I've done from Fat Eights because jelly roll is definitely faster. But I did not have a jelly roll of this collection. And actually, I bought this collection and I forgot why I bought it. So I don't think I specifically bought it for this. That might have been why I bought it. But it worked out. Oh, so you can see I did take out the 2 prints that were closest in pink to the background fabric. There were just 2. So took those guys out. Everything else was different enough that I left it in. I'm sure I'll find a use for those somewhere. Okay. Smooth it all out. Flip it over, smooth it out. Fold it in half. I don't know if you can tell I've done this 8 bazillion million times. Okay. Cut a 6.5 inch strip. Open them up. Smooth it back out. Go away. That was tough. Okay, now I'm gonna cut my. I planned this today because he was supposed to be at work, and then he took a sick day, so he's here. I'm gonna cut 5 2.5 inch. 1, 2. Oops, make sure I got that all the way. Yep. 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4, 5. Cut this down to 4.5 inches. And then I'm going to subcut this into 3 pieces. We are almost done. All right. I probably wouldn't save that scrap. I'm not quite that much of a hoarder. Okay, so I've got my last 4 fabrics. I'm gonna spread these out here. We're rapidly approaching the end of the school year, and I am not ready. We go to school later here than a lot of places. Our last day is June 15th, so we still have a little bit, but it's like the end of the school year is so crazy that it goes so fast. So my house won't be quiet for much longer. Our exchange student leaves on June 17th, so we still have she'll be here for a couple more days after school ends. She's been here. Oh, someone asked what size I'm making. I'm making the lap size. She's been here since like early August, so it's been a while. And she actually was in California for the summer before with a different host family. So she's been gone. She'll have been gone for like a year when she gets back. She's from Japan. And it's been great having her here. Okay. I got my last. I just love those little strawberries. They're so cute. Okay. Six and a half. Okay, I'm going to cut my first pieces here. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cut this down to 4.5. just need 3 more, and we're done. I don't usually make my binding until I've already quilted it, just because I sometimes change my mind about what I want to use, or I'm not sure. So I won't put my binding yet, or my backing. Done, done, done. All right. Here are all of my fabrics ready to go. That took about 45 minutes. If I wasn't talking, I think it would have taken more like 30, 35, something like that. Here's the background fabric. I did go with the pink. So I will save this video. I didn't really see questions. If you have questions about cutting, let me know and I'll do another video. I didn't really see questions, so I think we're good. I will save this to Instagram and to YouTube, and I will include the YouTube link when I send out the newsletter later today. So there we go.